Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's day 3 of the 45th edition of the Ottawa International Animation Festival. I'm Steph Barrington. I'm the Director of Industry Programming here at the OIAF. Today's discussion is co-presented by longtime OIF partners, CASO, that's the Computer Animation Studios of Ontario. I'm really excited for this very timely conversation about the changes to work culture in our industry post-COVID-19. Pleased to introduce today's moderator, Ben McEvoy, partner and executive producer at Friends and Enemies. Ben, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be back at Ottawa in my basement. It's always a different experience when you have to talk to your screen and hope your kids don't run through the background, which is why I have this lovely background behind me. I'd like to welcome our panelists and all the attendees to the session. Hopefully it's fun and valuable information. We've got a really great series of questions with some really interesting perspectives that'll be brought to the table by our panelists today. I'll do a quick setup here, and then I'm going to introduce our panelists. We'll just jump right in. So I'm working with CASO on behalf of Friends and Enemies, and we have been actually running a series of conversations throughout the course of the year, and it happens that we've been invited to speak at Ottawa in the course of those conversations around what we've been calling the creative future. Ontario's creative industry has become a respected hub globally, we'd like to think, producing enormous amounts of world-class content across styles and techniques for audiences on different platforms around the world. The competition is fierce and change can come quickly. We need to future-proof our current success and generate greater growth and opportunity for the industry at all levels by building a common, proactive outlook for the future of Ontario's creative sector. So how do studios stay competitive, and what are the new opportunities for small studios or artists to get into the game and to explore new opportunities, if it's in technology or if it's in IP? We'd like to explore those, and we're covering a lot of topics. Today, we're going to talk about the future of talent and the future of creativity. The COVID pandemic has pretty obviously changed how we do things across everything. I've got my mask here at my desk just in case, which is how much it's changed my personal life. What we want to explore today is how it's changed the way and where we work, but not just COVID post-pandemic or mid-fourth wave pandemic or whatever part of this pandemic we are currently in. The pandemic has accelerated and it's pivoted a lot of the historical trends that have been happening in the industry leading up to 2020. And I think today's conversation, we're going to look at how do things look in general when it comes to talent in animation sector, largely in Ontario, because this is an Ontario organization, but even globally, as well as where do we think it's going to go and what are the opportunities and risks. From hybrid studios to workforces scattered across the country, studios and talent have adapted in ways that are both exciting and challenging for us all. Join this diverse panel of voices as we explore the shifting work and culture models that are arising post-COVID, including massive cultural shifts that may ever change how we create amazing animation and VFX in Ontario and in the world. I'm going to turn over introductions, and I'd just like to let our panelists say hi and give us a quick background as to who they are so we can get a bit of context, and then we'll jump right in. So Aisha, why don't we start with you?
Thanks so much, Ben, and thanks for having me on the panel. My name is Aisha Ghali. I'm an independent animator here in Toronto, so-called Toronto. I've been working in animation since I graduated in 2016 from Sheridan College. I've worked as a storyboard artist and a director on both TV and feature film, and I've also had the chance to teach both at Sheridan and for the Toronto Animated Image Society. And I'm currently in production on my own independent film. Thanks.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask Raja next.
Hey everybody, and thanks Ben for hosting us today. I'm Raja Khanna. I'm the CEO of Dark Slope, which is if I sit up straight, you can see my logo. It's a spatial computing and metaverse company. We actually started in the gaming kind of world and location-based entertainment world, and have migrated towards animation and effects and production generally of television programming in the non-scripted world, but using animation. So it's lots to talk about. It's been an exciting time for virtual production and for game engine-based production, and keen to dig into it on this panel.
And I'm going to lastly, but not leastly, ask Ricardo to say hello.
Thanks, Ben. My name's Ricardo Curtis. I am the owner and president of House of Cool. We're Toronto-based. We specialize in pre-production for features and series, story, concept, design, storyboard, editorial, that sort of stuff. We don't do production work at all. We're only front end. I am a creative director there as well. So I'm an artist by trade and businessman by necessity.
Well, so.
And unfortunately, our fourth panelist wasn't able to join us today. I think there's a conflict that we weren't aware of, but we're going to roll forward with this wonderful crew and see where we head off. So we have representation from business owners and studio owners, both. Ricardo, with your pre-production and your focus in, I'm probably going to get land-based for, but more of a traditional kind of classic or legacy pipeline, let's say, in the industry. You've worked, I understand, in film and television for quite a long time. Raja, with Dark Slope, you guys are maybe more reflective of where new technologies are emerging with real time and with spatial computing and new exciting technologies. No doubt, Ricardo, you guys also incorporate new exciting technologies. And then Aisha, you're bringing an interesting perspective for us on this panel with regards to the artist perspective, as well as an independent filmmaker, and your experience being almost on the ground floor of the studio versus a floor up or above. So let's talk about where we are. And I've got a couple of starting points here, but I'll preamble with previous to the pandemic itself. It was an interesting time in Ontario animation and VFX, where it seemed like we were going through quite a heyday of a lot of opportunity, a lot of work. There was colleges who were graduating tons of artists. A lot of artists were starting to find work and stay steadily employed and moving between studios. No doubt there's technologies that were coming in that were starting to make people question if there's new opportunities to change. But for the most part, the trajectory seemed quite steadily moving in a positive direction, although I'm sure Ricardo and Raja and even Aisha, you may even have your own opinions as to how things were pre-pandemic. Of course, then as COVID hit, it changed the nature of how we work. A lot of artists were forced to go home and studios had to shut their doors temporarily so we could accommodate the health requirements. And then slowly, as we discussed in our last panel, we started opening back up and we started seeing new forms of business evolve, including things like hybridization, virtualization of production, introduction of new technologies. And we actually had some interesting conversations in our last talk. And if anyone's interested, by the way, the CASO Twitter feed does have that previous video, which is really great to see another group of interesting people talk about how their studios have adapted to the pandemic. But we started hearing a lot about how the nature of talent had changed. And what's interesting in our pre-conversation with this group was also how that accelerated some of the problems we've been facing when it comes to technology. I'm using my hands a lot. I'm starting to sit on them here. The problems and challenges that were prevalent probably before pandemic. And I'm kind of curious, Ricardo and Raja, on your perspective of the challenges that you're facing today, if they were something that you guys had before the COVID pandemic changed things for you, but also now that the pandemic seems to have sort of settled in and we're trying to work through what we hope is the ending of it, what we're now seeing as being the challenges. So I'm going to start with, and by the way, I should say, this isn't a panel focused strictly on challenges, but also an opportunity. So I'll try and weave those in. My first question will be to Ricardo. I want to ask you about what you feel are some of the key challenges that you're starting to see as a business owner and studio owner today, regardless of the pandemic, just the general kind of challenges that are out there in the industry for you.
I think for most businesses in Ontario in particular, but Canada in general, it's the same thing. It's talent. There is just so much work out there currently, and not just busy work, like high quality work that just wasn't available years and decades ago. You know, I've been in this industry for almost 30 years now, and you see the ups and downs, and we are in a very much in an up right now, and we want to take advantage of that as a studio, but talent wants to take advantage of that as well, and there's much more demand than there is supply of talent at the moment. I mean, that has always been an issue, even when I came out when I came out of school in the 90s. There was more work than there was talent to actually do it, and we are really feeling that again right now. So our challenge is to really put pressure on the schools to deliver the type of talent that we need, and not just people who want to do it, but people who are really skilled and ready to hit the ground running. You know, it's for certain jobs, it's a little bit easier, entry level jobs, but those aren't the ones that we really need. We really need the ones who are decision makers, the ones who are actually really putting the stamp on the content. And unfortunately, schools aren't delivering those, and it's unfair. It's unfair to ask for the schools to deliver that level of talent right out of the gate, but that doesn't stop us from asking. So that also forces us as business owners to create that talent as fast as you can, and it's not really that possible to create them quickly, because it takes time to get people to the level where they're actually usable, and our clients don't want to wait. They want it now, so we want it now. So yeah, that is by far our biggest challenge at the moment.
I'm going to ask the same question of all three panelists just to get the differing perspectives here. So Aisha, what would you say, being someone who works in the industry in production directly, as well as now running your own productions, what would you say would be some of the biggest challenges you seem to see from your perspective when it comes to talent in Ontario and in the industry at large?
Yeah, so of course, I don't have the same perspective as a business owner, so I don't get that full picture. But even when I was directing or working in the industry, I also felt that there was this sort of lack of talent as well. Like, I guess we're talking about lack of skilled artists. And I felt that the main challenge was that a lot of people were looking for work that didn't happen in Ontario. And I feel like that's maybe changed now because of the high quality work that's available now. But when I graduated, a lot of the work seemed to not be too appealing to people who were coming out of school, like people who I was teaching and my peers, my really high skilled peers. A lot of people were being drawn to the games industry, where there is so much cutting edge, exciting things going on, or drawn to bigger productions, more exciting productions in the States. And so when I was directing, I also felt that challenge of like finding people who saw, maybe I can put it this way, finding people who saw the production not just as like a job, but as something that they were going to commit to artistically and really put their all into. Like, I think there's this idea sometimes in people who work in the industry in Ontario specifically, that's what I can speak to, where it's a job and it's your 9 to 5 and you're doing it, but you don't really have that like passion that you might have if you were working on a passion project or working like on a bigger, more exciting production. So maybe I'll change my answer and I'll say, like, I think the biggest challenge was like the lack of, maybe the like desperation between whether the people working in the studios felt like artists or whether they felt like they were working in like an industry, in a trade, and they were doing a job as a trade or as an art form. And I think there's this tension that exists in Ontario specifically in that way, that seems to be challenging for anyone entering the industry or anyone wanting to stay here and make it better.
It's an interesting perspective. And I'm kind of like, when you mentioned games, I also want to ask Raja, because I know you guys work in a fairly different sector. I'm curious about both current and even through and pre-pandemic, what kind of challenges you face, because you guys work in a fairly emerging field relative to maybe a more traditional animation pipeline.
I don't think we have quite enough time for me to list all the challenges we faced resulting from this. We were primarily focused on location-based entertainment spectacles and theme park installations and big immersive VR and AR experiences, like warehouse scale experiences that we were creating, which you can imagine all just went away overnight with the pandemic. So there was plenty of challenges on the business side, and also on the talent side, like we're talking about, I think, but also on the technology side, quickly being forced into a global production pipeline for real-time, like virtual production, was quite a technical challenge. Now we've met that in quite a fantastic way, and it's armed us super well going forward. Now we've built all sorts of toolkits for things like remote directing of mocap actors and real-time pre-visualization, like all kinds of neat stuff that we've built into our pipeline as a result. But man, that was a challenge. But ultimately, we talked prior to this panel, but there's no question that the challenge facing us now, given the incredible demand in the industry, is talent. The same as everyone is saying here. I'd add to Aisha's point to say, for us, it's both on the pure artistry side, but also on the skilled technician side. So we need them both. And because we're a virtual production company, we're here talking about animation. We create animation and sort of mixed live action animation programs using a virtual production pipeline and game engines. We are competing for talent with everybody. We're competing with gaming companies first and foremost, making AAA titles for PlayStation. We're competing with VFX companies. We're competing with animation companies. We're competing with Facebook and Google sometimes. So it's very unique set of recruiting challenges, and not just recruiting, but training. And we touched on it earlier. So I'd say training, recruiting, and the tools. Although the tools one we've mostly solved. So, but training and recruiting are probably our two biggest challenges right now.
And maybe I'm going to just start with that subject. I actually, my background, I used to work in the post-secondary field for about 15 years with some of the Ontario colleges. So very familiar with kind of the inner workings of the programs and how they're built and how they're run. And of course, the challenges they face in terms of responding to industry needs, which seems to have been dramatically accelerated. When I think Ricardo and Raja about what you guys have been describing here, and I know Raja, you're speaking about specialist skills and the need to have people who are maybe the demand for their skills is quite unique to what is already being trained, and the need is now versus waiting the kind of the I guess traditional cycle, which would be about 3 to 4 years for them to identify the need and then incorporate it to the curriculum and then change it. And then Ricardo, conversely, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but what could you describe would be the challenge from the current state of training when it comes from the academic sector to your studio that's lacking, or the challenge not even of the lacking issue, but what is the problem?
I can only speak specifically for my studio, which specializes in pre-production. So we have a lot of story artists and designers and editors and that sort of thing. And because of the type of projects that we're working on at our studio, which tend to be feature films or on the high end of streaming, it's really difficult to take someone who comes straight out of school and put them on a show, put them on a film. because they just don't have the skills for it yet. It's not because they lack the talent. Yeah, they'll get to the talent. And maybe if someone coming out of school is really fantastic, within 4, 5, 6 months, they maybe can grasp what it is we're asking them to do. But even 4, 5, 6 months is difficult to ask a studio to, put them on train them on your own dime, right? And so if you're talking about 1, 2 people, no problem. But for us, I mean, we're not a huge studio, we're almost 150 people, but that still means that we have, a dozen people training and not really producing yet. So from our standpoint, it's like, well, where are these people? So then you end up putting pressure on the schools, and I'm part of Sheridan's PAC committee on setting curriculum, where it's like, give me this, and well, they can't. It's not fair to put that on their shoulders, because it's a sort of thing. It takes time. Everything from IT to producers, it takes time. It just doesn't happen overnight, and clients don't care. They don't care that it takes time, and they don't care that we have to seed a team with a senior, intermediate, and a junior, so that one day the junior will get to where they need them to be. They don't want that. We want all seniors all the time right now, because we got a boatload of money to put these shows on air as quickly as possible. And if you can't deliver that, we're going to try to look for someone else. That's what they say, but they can't, because they really can't look for others, because everyone's in the same boat, the identical boat. So
I want to put a pin in that, because I know you brought something up in an earlier conversation that you've mentioned as being a space or a place that you're looking to solve the problem if it's not people. Raja and Aisha, 2 different questions for you. I'm going to start, Raja, first with you, but Aisha, I want to jump back over to you right away. Do you have a similar issue as Ricardo, or is your issue a different issue? I know, you guys seem to have more of a specialist requirement. Is there something specific about the challenges that you're seeing when it comes to the training output when it comes to the schools that is specific to you guys?
When it comes to the schools, yeah, sure. I mean, we're producing in a new way. It's a new type of pipeline, and it's actually opens up a new set of creative possibilities, right? A lot of us shows on our development slate now are things you haven't seen before, like like a Ready Player One stuff, where you're going from the real world into a virtual world, and having components in each places, and using LED screens and motion capture and green screens and game engines to kind of create different type of creative possibilities. So even something like storyboard artists and like just trying to conceptualize a show, those people need to have an understanding of what we're talking about. It's not a completely new set of skills, but it's an understanding that is really hard to teach actually in a classroom. This is where I'll kind of underline what Ricardo was saying. This comes from practical experience more than it comes from didactic learning. And so I think we have to, as an industry, create more opportunities for practical, clinical kind of training, on-the-job training. And so that's something I think we all need to talk about, and how do we create more of it? But and then in the very skilled technician side of thing, like we need game engine developers, like literally the same people Ubisoft is trying to hire to build their next big game. So it's very, very competitive. They're very getting very expensive, and so we need a more effective way to build up the next generation of those, and that is the schools can step up there. Until recently, there really wasn't a lot of places for people to train and learn this stuff. And I don't, like you said, the 3-4 year kind of pipeline to change curriculum, like Unreal Engine kind of appeared on the scene and is changing the way productions or so many productions are done, like kind of overnight. So we do have to respond to that and put the training programs in quickly at the university. So I am hopeful from what I'm hearing from folks like Sheridan and ex-university, I guess we call them now, and others. I'm hopeful, but it's not that where it needs to be yet.
And Aisha, sorry. When it comes to your experience and your perspective, how are you seeing the same challenge? Like, as someone who's on the other end of this in many ways, or at least you're probably closer to the people who are also on the other end. When it comes to opportunities and when it comes to the nature of what Ricardo and Raja are describing, it sounds like it's sort of a buyer's market right now when it comes to job opportunities because there's so much going on. Do you agree with that? Do you see anything that's unique or interesting that may be actually considered an opportunity for talent?
For sure. I think that, as you said, it's a buyer's market right now for talent. And anyone who's willing to get these skills or train really hard, even if you're coming out of school, you take 6 months to just work really hard to learn coding or something like that, as we've seen in web development, as we've seen in those industries, you can get where you want to go because the jobs are available. I think one problem maybe that I'm seeing is that the ideas that people have when they go to animation school, these dreams that they have to be filmmakers, to make cartoons, their expectations when they're going into animation school is not really the reality that they're going into when they go into the industry afterwards. And so I think there's that problem kind of happening, and that kind of misunderstanding the industry and what they need from schools and what they're selling to students as what they're going to be learning when they go into schools. So I think there's this miscommunication through the entire training system. But yeah, in terms of people who want a job, which is of course the measure of health of an industry, there's plenty of jobs out there. And if people are willing, and if they have gracious studio hosts like the ones that we have here who are willing to train them, there's fantastic opportunities right now. I think that it's really to what Raja and Ricardo were saying about training people and the amount of time that you have to do that. I think that Ontario studios are definitely at a disadvantage compared to say Disney or Cartoon Network, who have all of this money that they can throw at training people. Disney has training programs, etc. And Ontario studios obviously don't have that much money. And I think that's one thing that we that I should have mentioned in my first answer. I'm kind of coming back into my body now. The talking into the cameras is a bit hard, but I think one thing that I didn't mention, one of the challenges that we face is just money and how much money is available in Ontario to train the people that we need to train, invest in the software and the hardware that we need to invest in. Those are, even when I'm running a small production, I was directing last year, even on a 2D show, budgets are so tight and everything is so tight. And so when people's consideration coming out of school is okay, I'm going to join the workforce, and my top consideration now, if I can't work at Disney or whatever, my top consideration is how much money can I make? Well, you would still consider Disney because you could make a ton of money there, but your top consideration is how much money can I make? It becomes tough when budgets are so small and you need the top talent and you can only offer people so much. So like I said, I'll repeat myself again, it definitely is a buyer's market because you can kind of, if you have the talent, you can try and find the best offer and put yourself in a pretty good position, I think.
Do you know much? Go ahead, Ricardo. Sorry.
No, I'd love to jump in on what Aisha has been saying, and she's right, definitely a buyer's market. And we are limited as funds because we are generally in Ontario, we're not the ones that are creating, we don't own the IP. We're generally the service studios who are serving larger studios. So therefore, we don't have all the purse strings. But beyond that, on the training side, is that it's often not conducive for us to train as hard as we want to for a number of reasons. For example, we have a school, but we do it in France because they're just much more supportive in France to get people trained than they are here. So we do it there instead. for us to train here, unlike in the States, you can sign a contract, and after they're trained, then they'll stay at your studio for a certain amount of time. In Ontario, we can't do contracts, and legally we can't do it. So when we train people, it's just, out of goodwill. As soon as we're done training, you can go wherever you like. So it's not conducive for us to train as hard as we would like to.
I'm going to pivot a little bit here and just move into two topics that may be related to this in terms of the solution to some of these pain points, and probably how the pandemic specifically has actually accelerated both of these. The first is our favorite three letters, WFH, working from home, and how that's changed the globalization of our workforce as well as the virtualization. And alongside that is the technologies that have evolved and changed in order to maybe support a hybrid and virtual workforce, and also maybe even technologies. And Raja, I'm kind of thinking towards where you operate, that replaces talent if that technology exists or will exist. And Ricardo, I know you made mention of something similar as well. If we don't have enough people here locally, well, there's really seems like there's two kind of obvious avenues that you guys are exploring. So maybe I'll start with you, Raja, just to get your thoughts here around the idea of the globalized workforce and how that's impacted your ability to run what your business, and or the technology impacts. How has that changed how you guys are able to do things, both in terms of reach as well as replacing talent?
Yeah, so I mean, we are a startup. We've only been around for 3 years. Pre-pandemic, we were like 17 people, and now we're about 85. So all that growth happened during the pandemic. And honestly, I don't even think it would have been possible pre-pandemic, because pre-pandemic, we were very much about everyone's in the office in Toronto. We have a big office that sits empty now. We moved in 4 months before the pandemic started. And it's so, and I don't think we would have found those 60 plus people if we were searching in Ontario or Toronto. Like, they're just not there. So the pandemic was, it was kind of the pandemic, but it was also kind of necessity. If you assume the demand was still going to be there from the customers and our partners, we had to go global. We just had to fit into this global workflow and remote collaboration world. Quickly onboarded all sorts of tools to support that. I don't even know them all, but any employee at our company probably regularly uses 6 different tools for communication and planning and project management, and all those cloud tools that you have to kind of employ. And then in our actual production pipeline, we had to build tools that didn't exist. Like, we had directors in the US that wanted to direct mocap choreography in Toronto on our mocap stage, but they weren't allowed to fly here, or at least not without great difficulty. So we built a remote directing tool because we had to, that gives them the ability to kind of, do live direction, and being able to see, rendered output in real time, while seeing actors on the stage and choreographing them. So it's a lot of tools came out of this. I'd say we're super proud of those tools. It makes us, I think, very competitive, and it's part. But man, I way prefer to be in person. Like, I'm not gonna BS you guys. Like, it's way better for creativity to be in a room. So we're, I'm struggling with this now and trying to figure out how do the genie's out of the bottle at Dark Slope. We are a global company. We're a remote company, period. There's no putting us back into being a Toronto company now, like based on what I just told you. So how do we reintroduce that FaceTime in a way that's, drives that creativity and collaboration the way I want to? So if we're saving money on office space, are we literally flying people to somewhere every month? Are we, how are we structuring the work, the way you work to kind of keep that element? I don't want to lose it. I'm not willing to lose it. So that's what I'd say off the top, but there's a lot in there.
Yeah. As this is we have like 25 minutes left, and there's so many more kind of rabbit holes we could fall down. So I'm going to keep going around, but I may come back to some of those points, Raja. Ricardo, and then Aisha, I've got kind of similar questions for both of you. Ricardo, when we had spoken before this panel, we had discussions around talent, and you talked about looking to technology as a way to maybe mitigate or solve the challenges you face. Can you describe what is it you guys are doing that, maybe technology, what kind of technologies are you exploring? And what kind of applications or implications does that have when it comes to your talent challenges?
Well, first I would say, I would agree with what Raja is saying. It's actually way better to be in person. And anything that we're trying to do is we would like to be able to approximate at least what it was like to be together, even though we're apart. And I mean, there's a myriad of reasons for that. I think creatively we're actually better, but there's a whole mental health thing about it that I think we're all running into as well. But for us, technology is less of something that we actually want to do, but it's something that we're being forced to do. And I mean, we're a business, so therefore we have to stay afloat. We have to give our clients what they want, and in the way that they want it. And there are forces, right? So what are clients willing to pay? What does it cost to get the talent to do these jobs? And when we start running into that wall, it forces the business to look elsewhere for other solutions. And this isn't just animation or my studio in particular. It's all businesses that they have to do this. You have to look for other options or essentially die. And so we look at the creative process, and when we say it's a buyer's market, which is great. I mean, I remember when I was an artist working for other studios, I definitely want to get paid well, and I definitely want to work on the best projects. And there's a lot of great projects out there, and a lot of studios, especially the large studios, are paying very, very well. So when you are a service studio that says that, well, if we can't attract the absolute best talent for a price that fits these budgets, now we have to look at traditional pipelines and say that, well, these traditional pipelines aren't going to work in the future. For us, we do a lot of storyboarding, and storyboarding really hasn't changed in 100 and some odd years. I'm sure we have Cintiqs and digital file systems and all those sort of things, but the way that we do it hasn't really changed. So therefore, we now have to look at other techniques. It says that, okay, how can we broaden what really qualified people can do and spread that amongst their talent amongst an entire feature or an entire series, instead of having to hire dozens and dozens of people? Can we do that with a handful of people? And while these these technologies and pipelines don't exist yet, it forces us, the way that the industry is set up now, it forces us to look for it, and we will find it. I mean, I'm not saying House of Cool will find it. I'm saying the industry in general will find it. And my fear is, personally as an artist, that when that solution is found, it's going to hurt artists in general, and it's only going to leave room for the cream, and there's not going to be a lot of space for people who aren't at the very, very top.
It reminds me a lot. I graduated in 2001 from Sheridan, right when Flash became a very popular production pipeline tool. And I graduated traditional animation, and I remember seeing the change over the course of maybe 5 to 10 years, where Flash became the de facto tool, and now we have other competing products like Harmony, where entire teams were basically reduced to 2 people by the nature of that technology, and seeing how that progresses forward. And I mean, that's one side of the technology when it applies to the kind of more, I call it traditional and respectful way. but the traditional pipelines of animation. And then of course, Raja, the technologies that you guys are dealing with kind of move us into a whole new direction where I think about storyboarding for VR experiences or XR experiences and how that particular set of skills is kind of missing as well. I'm gonna switch over to Aisha. I want to chat with you just about the concept of work from home. And I'm actually, just so our audience viewers, questions being listed here, and I'm picking through them just so if I can get the kind of the essence of some ideas. So hopefully some of these questions are being answered. A friend of the festival, Mike Valaket, had a good question. I'm just gonna lob this one to you, Aisha, and then I'm gonna turn it back to Rick and Raj. That maybe have a higher volume of concentration of talent as well as places that don't, and the access to opportunities as well as the empowerment it's provided to say you don't have to work in Ontario, you could work elsewhere, which will then flip over to the others. So I'm just going to read Mike's lines verbatim really quickly here, but how has working from home empowered the talent pool? Some studios have felt the impact on productivity, while perhaps it's been removal of the invisible pressure to work late. Artists seem in more control of their well-being, are setting different boundaries, and I'm while at the same time sharing more information, like comparing salaries. I know Mike's got an initiative going on that. Look at opportunities maybe further afield, and being asked to. How do you? And also maybe because we're going to start pointing to the future a little bit more with these questions, where do you see that leading?
Yeah, well, that's like a huge question, right? There's so many things that go into that. So if we're talking about how the talent pool is empowered, specifically in Ontario, there's definitely benefits to not having to live in downtown Toronto, which is one of the most expensive cities in the world. You don't have to do that anymore. You could live somewhere out in the suburbs or just elsewhere. So that's, I'm sure, lots. Empowering. I know, and I've heard from people who work in the States that it's a lot easier for US studios to get Canadian visas now because of what happened with the pandemic. So people have an easier time working from the States and still having all the benefits of living in Canada and having healthcare and all of those things. So I think it's, and also then you get paid in USD, which is also always a benefit, I'm sure. So I think in all those ways it's empowering. I think there are options in built off of the tax credits, and we don't need to totally get into that, but like how
we
in
will.
business. Okay. I wasn't
This
sure
is
if
an
you wanted
Ottawa
to go
festival panel. We're going to do the tax credits.
All right. Yeah, because now if people don't have to live in Ontario to work in Ontario, but a lot of the benefits that we had in the Ontario animation industry were these tax credits that we had. It was a huge boon financially. So I'm not equipped to answer that.
No, sorry, it was a lot.
That's
But
okay.
basically, we already talked about the buyer's market nature.
Yeah.
And I'll give a bit more context here. And I do want to bring in Raj and Ricardo in a second. But in our last panel that we did back in March or April, there was discussions around a harder time finding work because of the nature of having to be local. But also some studio owners were finding, this is actually a good pivot for Ricardo and Raja, we're finding that people are getting approached to work remotely, even just going south, but even to Europe. Remotely in multiple time zone differences. And so it created an empowerment for people to say, well, I don't need to be kind of constrained by the geographic boundaries of my opportunities. I can look globally now. And so it created that sense of agency. Right.
You reminded me of something else that I wanted to touch on that relates to this question from what Ricardo and Raja said, which is talking about the lack of in-person, like how not being in person affect creativity, because from an artist perspective, I also feel that it is detrimental to our creative ability. Like, animation is a team sport, right? We all work together on it. And so not being able to be in a studio where you can be away from your life, be away from family, be away from everything, and just focus on your craft and focus on working out with other people. I think that's one way that artist agency has been affected, is that they can't have this work-life separation. They can't take that space and just focus in on their craft, which I already said. But yeah, I think that's like the only way that I can think that it is not healthy for the creativity of our industry to be working from home. But I think in every other way, in terms of childcare, in terms of not having to live in the city, in terms of the opportunities that people now have for work, it's been hugely beneficial.
Raja, I'm going to ask you the next question. As a business owner, and this, I'm going to start naming off the people because I'm actually reading questions now from the audience. Lola Zhang, when it comes to recruitment, knowing both you and Ricardo, and probably a lot of studio owners are in a similar position of, you're looking for the best of the best. And so you're trying to make sure you're finding the best locally, but knowing that those local folks could also pick up work in Arizona for all they care. Is this a legitimate concern for you? And if so, how are you competing? You know, I mean, Aisha talks about some artists want to work on, you know, knowing, by the way, I personally feel we have a lot of that going on already, and I'm very excited about that. But maybe an artist wants to move further away, and studios are now looking to be able to draw people in. How are you able to compete, or how are you trying to compete in that kind of environment?
It's tough. I'd say obviously it gets easier as we get bigger and have more interesting projects. I think Ricardo said it earlier. People want to work on cool stuff, so we got to pay more than we ever planned on. That's just a sad reality. Not sad for the people we're hiring, but tougher on our margins. And because it hasn't translated yet into the buyer market or partner market. And then of course it screws up all of our tax credit math, all of it. And that's just a reality. Obviously, if we're hiring outside of the country in Ontario, which we are, because out of necessity, that's a thing. So I think it's having a profound impact. I think we got to rethink a lot of things. It kind of has this perverse effect of making us focus on bigger buyers that tend to be harder to negotiate with from a rights perspective, which is kind of the opposite of what we want to do. Not to get too into the policy side of this thing, but I mean, we're building a rights company more than anything else. We own the rights to the work that we do mostly, and across television and gaming. And so at some point, it gets harder, might cross the line to very hard, if not impossible, to finance certain productions when you're dealing with this type of talent cost. And it's not Canadian, and you don't have the benefit of the tax credits, et cetera, et cetera. So these are real challenges that we're navigating every day. But I'll tell you, it makes the gravity of the U.S. market that much stronger. And we just tend to focus more and more and more there.
It's a really great opportunity for me to pivot. Rick, I want to ask you another question around, this is from Mike Schneer. I'm going to get it wrong, and I'm sorry. Mike asked, in your opinion, why should talent and the challenge, I think your term, Raja, of gravity of the United States, I think even the gravity of global opportunity is maybe quite appealing in some ways. It opens up a lot of new avenues. Why should people be excited to keep working in Ontario? What's going on? I mean, this is a bit of an opportunity for us to pump, but even from your perspective, what do you think makes it so much more valuable to stick around in Ontario and do great work?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a really great question. I mean, it's a question that everyone coming into this industry, especially coming from Ontario, has to ask. They should ask even before they get into the industry. I did, when I got out of when I graduated from Sheridan, I did work in Ontario a little bit, but I went to the States. I mean, I was in California and New York for almost 10 years. So that question for me was answered very easily, which was what I wanted to do did not happen in Ontario. There was none. So therefore, I had no choice. Now, a lot of that has changed. And this is one of the benefits from work from home, is that you can work anywhere. You can work anywhere on anything for anyone. And so there's a question, if I'm in Ontario, should I be working for someone in Ontario? I guess is really what the question is. And that question can only be answered by the type of person, talent that you actually want to be. If you're someone who can do work from home all the time, it doesn't matter. Work anywhere makes absolutely no difference to you. If you're someone who needs the artistic experience of actually being around other artists and work on an interesting project that you guys, that you find interesting, then yeah, you do need to look what's locally and how you can kind of make that work. See, I'm a little jaded on this right now because currently what's going on in the industry is very kind of mercenary-like. It's the, best project, most money. That's where I am. Best project, most money. That's where I am. And that's great. I totally understand and I totally get it. But this industry works in cycles. And we're at a very high cycle right now. 5 years from now, that could be very, very different. And the way that you're seen as a professional will determine what kind of jobs you get in the future. And if you are a straight up mercenary, as a business owner, we will see you as a mercenary. That means we can't build a business around you. I'm just going to pay you. And when you're done, you leave and you continue to be a mercenary for someone else. Now, if I'm looking at talent where it says, I can see this person long-term, therefore I can build a system around them. I can create projects that are well suited for them. I can build teams around them. Then, there's a benefit for me as a studio to do that, but then it becomes a benefit to the artist or whoever the talent is, that they in the long term can get things that are better than just finding the next job, which is good now but may not be great in the future.
I think it's really compelling advice, Ricardo, for any of the artists who are listening in on this panel right now as well. As I think about when we use the term buyer's market, it's a little bit divisive or confrontational in terms of how we would view ourselves as a kind of cohesive whole in the industry. And, as much as being able to work anywhere around the world certainly has appeal. As someone who's been able to travel quite a lot in my career, there's certainly a lot to be said for stability and growth beyond just making good money. Great book for anyone out there called Drive by a man named Daniel Pink, who talks about what motivates us beyond money. And there's quite a lot. And I think even Aisha, you talk about the idea of artistic satisfaction as a key component as well. But the idea of being able to view yourself as someone who has the opportunity to grow in Ontario versus simply making a bunch of money wherever the money may be flying at you. We are running a little light on time here. I've tried to cover off some questions, but I want to leave with a question for each of you that will get us to the finish line. And it's a bit of an open-ended question, but hopefully you can keep it to 2 minutes. We've talked a lot about the challenges in Ontario and when it comes to talent as studio owners, and also some of the opportunities when it comes to what it's like to be talent and the nature of how the industry itself is changing and how production is changing and how everyone's responding both to solve problems as well as take advantage of opportunities. I'm most curious about, as an optimist eternally, what has you most excited in the next 2 to 3 years when it comes to not just animation and Ontario, but just in general with what you're doing? What do you think really gets you most eager to see, what's the most exciting thing for you coming up in the future? I'm going to start with you, Raja.
Wow. I was on another talk earlier this week. We were talking about kids' business is down by whatever 30% in Ontario over the last couple of years. It was some headwinds. I mean, we have this advantage of having just started with this sort of new approach to technology. Everybody's favorite executive, Mark Zuckerberg, just said that Facebook is a metaverse company. I don't know what that means, but it's that I'm living in a very dynamic world of VR and immersive technology and spatial technology and new ways of creating content. For me, this is like pure adrenaline. I love every second of it. We're making shows that I can't wait to tell everyone about, like things that are just haven't been done before. And I alluded to it before with actors going in and out of, these types of virtual worlds and competing and doing things. And so I think creatively it's inspiring. Technically it's inspiring. The concept of being, some of the stuff we talked about remote work, even that stuff is starting to be solved by AR and VR technologies. And how can you feel real presence using technology? So I think we're living in the heyday of this technology, and it's going to change everything. That's my entrepreneurial tech guy talking. I believe that spatial computing is the next platform after mobile. And it's going to change entertainment, and it's going to change how we work. And it's, a lot of the things we talked about on this panel are going to be affected by this tech. So I'm pumped by absolutely everything. And I love it. The only we focused this whole talk on the one vampire in my life, which is recruiting. It's the only one. We've still managed to grow quite a bit, but everything else is green lights. Finding the people is the hard one. And I think if we come together as an industry and get the schools really moving and build more paid internships and partnership with the universities and do that, we could solve that problem too. Then we can solve the tax credit problem later on a different panel.
Okay. That's a whole, I'm getting comments in the threads here about we should extend this talk to 1 hour. So that's, I think, shows the depth of where we could go with this. Aisha, what would you say? And I'm kind of giving you guys an optimistic question, but feel free to pivot to doom and gloom if it makes you feel like it's a better answer.
Raj's answer actually just made me an optimist because I'm a broken record about having our own IP, Ontario having its own productions, all of us like having our own, really showing the talent that we have here in Ontario and like growing that brain trust. And I think that from what Raja's saying, there's an opportunity in VR to go that avenue and like make a lot of money that way and then start reinvesting in our industry. I wish we could extend the talk because there were so many things that people said that I wanted to respond to, but I will keep my answer short.
Ricardo, do you think you can give us a lightning round on this?
Yeah, sure. So my thing is that I'm still, highly excited about this industry. I love what I do. I love what this industry can do. And so for me, the most exciting thing of what's coming in the future is basically the killing of the gatekeepers. And what really holds us back, not just in Ontario, but anywhere basically outside of Hollywood, is that they are the gatekeepers. They determine what is good, what gets made, what gets financed. And technology, as well as just tastes of the general public, are changing and changing very, very fast. It used to be terrestrial television and feature films. That was pretty much it. Well, those doors have been kicked down, and they will continue to be kicked down. How people see animation, this type of entertainment, is very much changing. Anime was a very niche thing when I was in school. Now it's just like my kids don't watch anything but anime. It's changed the way that they've seen content and what they accept in content. Gatekeepers all the way from big studios to ratings agencies, they won't matter as much in the future, which allows us to create more amazing and unique content in the future. Not here yet, but it's getting there.
I wish we had more time. Thank you, Aisha, Raja, Rick, for your interesting insights, all of the things you had to say, to our attendees for all the comments. I think there's a really clear interest in hearing more about this, and unfortunately, we are out of time. So I want to thank everyone. And I also want to just as a quick at the end before I hand it back to Stephanie, hold on to the mic one more second. CASO has been doing talks around subject matter similar to this, and my hope is that we'll have another one before the year's over. So please do, if you're not familiar with CASO, go find out who we are, and also just keep your ears open for more talks, and feel free to reach out to any of us through the chats on, I don't know what's called, Swapcard, in case you want to follow up the conversation further. Enjoy the rest of your festival and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks so much, Ben, and all of our
Thanks,
speakers.
everyone.
It was a great
Thank
course.
you.
Thank
Cheers.
you. It's Ben, Aisha, Raja. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys.